Hello and welcome to the Elders Insight, an exciting new podcast series presented by Hepworth & Associates, your source for advocacy, advisory, and planning insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their caring families. Today's podcast is sponsored by Rotary Dial Media. So let's get started with the show on location. Well, here we are again with another episode of the Elders Insight, and we want to thank all of you listeners for the terrific show of interest from our inaugural broadcast in May. We're amazed by the response that we've received, and we want to thank you all very much for your email questions, thoughts, ideas, and thumbs up. Clearly we're onto something here, and there really is a need for this kind of information that we're bringing. So stay tuned for more episodes. Tell everybody you know to dial in, and I guess the phrase is click in. And remember that all episodes of the Elders Insight are recorded and available at Hepworth & Associates at www.hepworth.ca. That all said, let's get on to today's episode. My name is Jim Ellis, and I'll be your host for this podcast. And we're broadcasting live from Peterborough, right along the fabulous view of the Otonabee River. Today's episode relates to one of the key elements of our Aging Well model, and that being lifestyle. As our regular listeners may remember, the Aging Well model is made up of the 5 elements that we consider the keys to aging well. Those being health, housing, legal finance, lifestyle, and family. And while many people focus most of their attention on the finance element, the ever-important nest egg for retirement, the balance of the other 4 are just as important. Now when it comes to lifestyle, aging is as much about what you do with your time after you retire as it is about your health, as the two are remarkably connected to each other. So let's be clear, while lifestyle does include the post-retirement bucket list of vacations, purchases, tours, and etc., it's even more about what you do after with those things on a regular basis, like hobbies, volunteering, family, friends, activities, and those things that keep your mind and body engaged. Today's episode is a mix of those lifestyle components, bucket list, hobbies, and activities, all rolled into one called music. And there's no one better to talk about music than a good friend of mine that I grew up in high school from a long way back by the name of Glenn Ironside, who's sitting in front of me right now.
Good morning, Jim, and thanks for having me on. We definitely do go a long way back into the high school days. And boy, we don't look any different at all.
No, we haven't changed a bit. Your giant afro is now a respectable business cut, and my stringy brown locks are snow white and short. The reason we've invited Glenn to today's podcast is more than to talk about where our hair went. It's about a path that Glenn has taken towards his lifestyle plan. And it's a plan that some of our listeners may be interested in, or even adjust it to suit the very hobby that you might want to focus on. So Glenn, tell us about the lifestyle plan that you've been working on for some time now.
Well, to start with, I guess it's one of those things where you start looking ahead a little bit while you're still in the employment world, and you start thinking, gee, what can I do when I get there? What kind of things can I do? And I guess in my case, because music has always been a big part of my life, it was all about how can I maintain, or how can I prep for sort of the next stage of that. That's something I've been very passionate about way back even before our high school days. Music and performing and recording and writing have always been something that I was just always there. I never really had to think much about it. I just always wanted to do it. As a backgrounder, Jim and I spent lots of time together in a nice little rock band established, well, back in the 70s now, I guess, called Roadshow. And although maybe you've never heard of it, it's quite understandable, as no one else is likely to have heard about it either. We didn't exactly reach rock star status, but we did have a good few outings with a number of different audiences. Performance theatrical thing at Ryerson called Riot, which was a great thing. That was a lot of fun.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and although the rock star thing was probably in our minds, I think the reality is that we were just having a great time together making music.
We were pretty darn good, and he's being shy right now, but Glenn was our lead singer and the rhythm player, and I'm going to even go as far as to say sort of the spirit of the band was darn good.
Well, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. I think it was obviously, like any band or any group thing, it's a collaborative effort, and we all put our pieces together. But, eventually, like so many other things, life starts to get in the way and other things become priorities, and you kind of drift in and out of things. And while you can never really put music down if it's in your blood, you do make other sacrifices. So, I gave up music entirely, walked away from my guitar and my voice completely when things like bills had to be paid, employers to be satisfied, and I had that crazy afro to tame. That said, it never really does leave you. Once you're a musician, you're always a musician. I think the same goes for other hobbies too. Maybe once you're a golfer, you're always a golfer. It gets in your blood. It's a passion. So that happened to be my passion. And clearly for a while, I didn't have time to pursue it all. But then as retirement approached, and like I said, you're looking forward a bit, then you start to wonder what might be around the next corner.
So how did you get back into it? I know you were away from it for a little while. What was your plan of attack? How did you just suddenly decide, I'm going to go get back into the business that I know I love?
Well, I think a lot of it was just the current lifestyle I was in allowed me to kind of get there. I started off thinking, well, okay, what can I do now? How can I prep for this? And then I just started looking around and looking at the current market. And I'd been away from it for so long that I'd really become out of touch with a lot of the technology changes. And that was something that really, really struck me hard. People don't think of that. And again, with other hobbies, that happens too, right? Things change, the products, the materials, how you access things, all that stuff starts to change. So that was, part of it was getting back and doing research on what else I could do, what was out there to do. And that was kind of exciting because it was something completely fresh and new. So it gave me a little bit of a different perspective. And although I didn't actually stay in the music business, I was involved in other projects that kept me connected to the audio world. And I had always been fascinated with the recording side of the music business as well as the performance and writing. So for me, I had an opportunity to tie in with a few people that were doing audio related work, and that gave me the opportunity to kind of keep my feet wet, so to speak, and stay in that whole area.
That really resonates, because if you and I go back and think of the kind of technology we played around with in the 1970s and what's available now, actually for the folks that can't see this right now, I'm actually sitting in Glenn's studio, and it's, as much as it's a musician's hideaway, it would be an IT technologist's dream to see what's available here right now. What kind of research did you do, or how did you find yourself now knowing what to do with the equipment that I'm looking at right now?
Well, I actually started picking up some of the modern musician magazines again and started reading through, and there's a lot of articles in there. And really, the coming of the digital age was a huge component because, back in the day, in the analog days, I did run for a while a very small analog equipment, and when I say analog, I'm referring to the old style tape decks and preamplifiers and big speakers and all those kinds of things. And I did run a small studio using that equipment for a while, recording jingles and small duos and things like that. But of course, it didn't allow you the capability to produce anything with any real quality that could be competitive in the audio world or the radio play world.
True.
You'd never create something in your basement there that you could actually play on the radio. So one of the things that the research allowed me to do was to realize what a huge change there'd been with the coming of the digital age. And suddenly I was reading about people that were able to create, produce, and actually generate income from producing albums right in their own homes. So that was a bit of a shocker, and at the same time, really intriguing to want to get into.
For a lot of the listeners that we have right now, when they hear that a hobby contains a lot of technology, it has a tendency for some people to not even go in that direction. Did you find, even though there's a lot of new technology, was it that difficult to get there, or like we're hearing now, or was it pretty intuitive?
Well, I think the music playing side of it was always there, and it was fairly intuitive. But certainly the recording side of it was radically different than what I was used to. Mm-hmm. And although it was a challenge, I kind of took it in manageable bites. I just thought, okay, I'll do a little bit today, and then I'll read a little bit tomorrow, and I'll kind of build up to where I'm comfortable enough that I can do it. And I can attest, even though we're sitting here in my studio, this is scratching the surface of what's available today, but it comes to what you're going to use.
Yeah.
like other hobbies too. Do you need to go crazy buying the fastest boat on the water if you're going to get into boating? Well, no, maybe not. With the music thing, it's the same idea. You look at the recording equipment that's available and you say, what are my needs? And actually, that's part of the fun part of it, is figuring out, what do I really need to do to create what I'm imagining in my head?
So, got the technology, you've caught up with that, you pulled the guitar back out of the rack, and how'd you get your voice back? Or did it ever leave?
Well, such that it is. I never considered myself a great singer. Maybe more of an interpreter might be the better word. It was something you just kind of get back at, and you just start doing it. And, I did all the traditional things like running scales up and down and those kinds of things to try and get my voice back. And then a big part of learning about the recording technology was just to jump in and not have a fear of playing with it. So just jump in and start recording. If it didn't sound great, doesn't matter. You're learning the technology as you're getting yourself back up to speed again. So it's sort of two things going together in tandem. And that seemed to work out pretty well for me. It let me ease my way back in without feeling overwhelmed by the technology.
Exactly.
And then I could slowly get my voice back up to speed again, and then I started to record, and then I started to get influenced by the technology to actually start writing again. And it became a natural tool. And then the trick after that was developing some kind of workflow.
Okay.
Like you do with any kind of hobby. You need to be able to. You need to have a starting point and a middle point and an end point, and you need to have something that rolls slow. You're not random. You're not running around in circles figuring out, what do I do next?
Yeah.
So I actually sat down and plotted out a typical workflow that would work me through the technology and get me to my end goal, which was a completed piece of music that I could say, hey, listen to this, look what I did.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that was kind of a fun part of it.
You now actually have, and have had for a while, a CD that you produced right in this studio. I know it took you a long time to do it, but it was also part of the fun of the hobby. Like, for those who are boat builders, you actually built a boat. And actually, for the listeners, at the end of today's show, we're actually going to play you a piece out of Glenn's CD called, what's it called again?
Simply Complicated.
Simply Complicated, which got an interesting twist to it already. So what was it like? You get it all set up, and you actually now get a chance to hear your very first recording. What's it like?
Fantastic. Yeah, I got to say, it really was. When I was able to sit back and listen to something that would have taken 4 or 5 guys and hours of studio time back in the day to create, I could actually create myself right here in my studio and listen to it back, and it sounded like a full band playing, and I thought, wow, this is really spectacular.
It is remarkable. Again, for the folks that are going to hear this, you're going to hear, literally, I'll call it magic. You're going to hear the kind of things that would have literally taken days and hours in a professional studio a million years ago to what you can actually create. And again, I think that's a good snapshot of, for those who are pursuing a particular hobby, it may in fact be so much easier to do than it used to be, and a lot more rewarding. But again, you can't see this as I'm looking at it, but the smile that broke out on Glenn's face when I asked him what it was like to finally hear it, did it bring back memories though?
It did. It really did. Creating the stuff brought, I was thinking about stuff all the time. And in particular too, I was thinking about you, because we spent so much time working together on guitar, and a lot of the stuff that influenced me was the same kind of stuff that influenced you, only you could actually do it on a guitar back then. I couldn't. So it was a big struggle for me, but I worked through a lot of it and got to a point where I thought, okay, and I used to reference, I'd say, gee, would Jim be proud of this? And I'll tell you, one of the things about working by yourself at any hobby, again, is you become your own self-critic, and you're your own worst critic. You look at stuff and you go, well, gee, I could do better than that. And there is a point, especially with music recording, where you have to step back and say, the bird's cooked. I'm done. I can't do any more. Anything else is not gravy on the bird anymore. It's detrimental. I'm sure all artists go through that same. If your gardening is your hobby, you're going to get to a point where you have to say, I can't plant any more flowers. I'm choking out my garden. I'm done.
So the CD is called Simply Uncomplicated. Interesting title. So where did that come from?
Well, I guess honestly, when you're writing material, And often lyrics will come first for me, but there's really no rhyme or reason to that, the way that works. Sometimes I'll come up with music first. Sometimes a drum beat can inspire something. But in the case of Simply Complicated, it was kind of a reference to what I was doing. It was the technology. There was parts of it that were really simple to put together and other parts that were very complicated. And it was about building a workable bridge between those two components.
Wow.
So that, it would come out as a final product in the end. But the phrase Simply Complicated and the lyric of the song really just sort of speaks to that whole effort, or work effort, if you like.
So this is an interesting aspect, because we're talking about one specific hobby that's turned into your lifestyle, which is an amazing piece of lifestyle. But you mentioned something, you did follow a process that does sort of fit regardless of the hobby. And if I sort of reflect back, there's a certain amount of research that went into it. There was a lot of learning and some training that you took along the way, even though you were a musician beforehand, give you the chance to sort of come back and boost those skills. You invested some time. I'm going to presume, looking at what I'm looking at, you also invested some money. But now you're just doing and enjoying the heck out of it. So what's the advice that you would give then to other listeners who might be not just aspiring musicians and artists, but, I don't know, chefs, actors, volunteers, or whatever? What's your advice to them now that you've been down this path?
Go for it. As long as you've got your health and you're able to do things, go for it. And part of, I think, maintaining your health is going for it. Well, I think one supports the other to a large extent, right? You get to a point where you wonder, what can I do next, physically, mentally, all that sort of thing. But if you have some faculty and you have some physical ability, my whole thing is just jump in, and then you'll learn about it through trial and error. I think a lot of people just don't know how to start. That seems to be the biggest roadblock. They just can't start. But once you get over that initial hurdle, then you kind of just keep picking away and picking away. And it's the picking away of it that keeps you young. It keeps you feeling good. It keeps you challenged mentally and physically, and you just work your way through it. And I would just say to people, go for it and then stick with it.
Yeah.
None of this stuff ever comes fast, and by our age, we've learned that, hopefully, right? So that's the big lesson of getting older. So just keep at it, keep working, keep learning. For me, I always find it interesting to go and talk with other people to learn things as well as read about things. I like to be face-to-face. I like to do that kind of part of it. I learned a lot about the technology of the new recordings by actually going to recording studio classes, which are the kind of things that are offered now all over the place, which were never available when I was younger. And the same thing with anything you do. We have a fantastic garden center here in Peterborough, and they actually give classes on gardening and how to start and what to do and how to build, because that can be as overwhelming as anything else you want to do. So just get in and do it.
Last question, and it's sort of an observation at the same time. It sounds as though you've actually got a pretty good reason to wake up every damn day and spend some time.
Yeah, I would say that's the case. I've been blessed with a great family. That gets me out of bed in the morning. I have a brand new, 15, 16-month-old granddaughter now, which keeps me busy as well.
I'll bet.
And I just love going for walks. I have boats here on the river now, and I can go for a boat ride or a canoe ride. And I think that's really the trick, is just to keep active, and that gives you that reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Beautiful. Glenn, got to tell you, man, it's still amazing to be looking at you. No kidding, folks. I have not really had a chance to see this guy since 75, 76.
Wow.
And thank God we're even better looking than we did back then.
I've tamed the afro somewhat.
A delightful chat. Awesome to see you, man. Just like I knew it was going to be. Great conversation. Big thanks to you on behalf of listeners and yours truly. As you know, our advice to clients and listeners is about planning to age well and the kind of peace of mind that comes from it. So it's so good to hear from someone who's really got a handle on what the lifestyle piece is all about.
Well, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to do it. It was awesome to get together with you again, and your snowy white hair. I can say that because I have the same thing. And thanks to your listeners too. Hopefully they may gain something from this, and if we can pass on some info to each other, part of that thing is the whole sharing business. You share stuff with people, and then everybody learns. So thanks so much for the opportunity.
Awesome, man. You know what? Okay, folks, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you all for joining us once again. I want to thank everybody that's been clicking in for the podcast over the prior weeks. Don't forget, if there's any that you've missed, they're still available on the website, www.hepworth.ca. And again, your comments have been very encouraging. Thanks for the many great ideas that are still coming towards us. We understand there's more subjects you want to hear about. You're clearly keeping us all very busy. If you'd like to get in contact with today's guest, Mr. Glenn Ironside, and even get a copy of his CD if you're a nice person, just drop us a line. We'll make sure that happens. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to go out on the lead tune of the actual CD. So stay tuned for more of our podcasts as we continue to provide you with those insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their families for aging well. Tell your friends, your co-workers, relatives, and neighbors. We got lots of room for everybody right in here. See you then. Thanks for joining us today on The Elders Insight. We hope you found this podcast helpful, informative, interesting, and most of all, fun. We hope you can join us for our future podcasts as we continue to be your source for advocacy, advisory, and planning insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their caring families. A big thanks to Hepworth & Associates team, and we look forward to seeing you the very next time here on The Elders Insight.
Get some attention from you. Took a spill, but what a thrill. There's nothing else I could do.